Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we have a couple of great reporters coming on. We're going to do what? The big stories of the week. But first, why should you care about Marsy's Law? We'll get to that after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Welcome back to the program. Hey, Thanksgiving is coming up. Hope you have a great one. Let's start out with this. Pennsylvania is only one of 15 states that does not provide constitutional protections to crime victims. We're going to get into that with Jen Riley. She's the state director for Marsy's Law of PA. All right, let's start. What's Marsy's Law? Well, first of all, who is Marsy?
Yeah, so Marsy was a beautiful woman. She lived in California, college student, beautiful blonde hair. And tragically, she was murdered by her ex-boyfriend, stalked and murdered back in 1983.
Okay.
And a week after her death, her brother and mother went to go visit her grave. And afterwards, they went to the grocery store, normal activities, and ran face-to-face in with the accused, the murderer.
Gosh. You can't imagine what that would be like, can you?
No, and they had absolutely no notification that he had been released on bail.
Oh, my golly.
Now, this is clearly a violation of their rights as a victim, but without constitutional protections, there's no recourse for crime victims. And so on that day, her brother, Marsy's brother, started Marsy's Law, and they're going state by state across the country to protect crime victims.
Okay, so when you say protect crime victims, what is it that you would protect? Explain what these protections are.
So here in Pennsylvania, we're really fortunate that we have great rights for crime victims already in Pennsylvania statute. The problem is we're one of only six new states just passed Marsy's Law. So we're one of only 9 states that don't have constitutional protections. So what that means...
50 states, only 9 do not.
That's right.
Okay, go ahead.
And Pennsylvania is one of them. And it's really unfortunate. So what Marsy's Law is trying to do is simply take what we have in statute currently for Pennsylvania crime victims and elevate those rights so that there can be recourse for victims. So we're not making any new laws for crime victims. We're simply giving crime victims standing in the courtroom.
So you're giving them standing, and you can't do that just by passing a statute, by passing a law. Right. In effect, what you have to do is amend the Pennsylvania Constitution, and that's not an easy thing to do.
It's not.
So, I mean, talk specifically, if you will, about when you say protect victims, give them, can you give me some examples?
Sure.
Give the viewers some examples of what that means?
I'd be happy to. So let me give you a real life example. So let's say that a crime victim is in the middle of a sentencing process with the, at that point, convicted. We all know that crime victims have an opportunity to give an impact statement during sentencing.
Okay.
If you remember the Larry Nassar case, right? So let's say that a victim is not notified of the proceedings, they're not present because they weren't notified, and they're not heard in the courtroom.
So they're not, in effect, because they weren't aware of it, they weren't there at the sentencing to make their statement about what they think what the adjudication should mean.
That's right, and that's their right to do that right now in statute. If that doesn't happen, the sentencing proceeds and the victim's voice is not heard. Now, if Marsy's Law, if we're successful in elevating Marsy's Law to the Pennsylvania Constitution, crime victims would then have the opportunity to petition the court to have a resentencing. Right now, there's absolutely no recourse, unfortunately, that we can give to crime victims if that occurs.
Yeah. You also have some other things here. Receive timely notification of changes to the offender's custodial status. Does that mean they would have a right to know where the offender is, what the conditions are? Let's say they're on parole or something. Finish my thought.
Yeah, so right now, basically in a nutshell, crime victims have the right to be heard in the courtroom. They have a right to be present in the courtroom, and they have the right to be notified throughout the entire criminal justice process. So they have the right to be notified of all proceedings, but then they also have the right, after the convicted is in the prison system, they have a right to be informed about where that perpetrator is within the prison system. Right now, we have advocates all over the state doing that well, but we just need to make sure, we need to codify those rights in the Constitution.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to, and you have some points here, not a partisan issue. We have a crime victims bill. We want to talk about whether that's, you don't think that's sufficient enough. And we're going to get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, I'm chatting with Jen Riley. She's the state director for Marsy's Law of Pennsylvania. We're getting into the what should be, according to Jen, the constitutional rights for victims. And it's not going to cost additional money. It's just putting in the state constitution a variety of things that victims are permitted to do. So you have to amend the Constitution, which means 2 sessions of the Pennsylvania legislature and then a vote by the folks at the ballot box. So where does it stand now?
So we're really fortunate that we have great support with our General Assembly here in Pennsylvania. We passed unanimously this past session. So in January, a new session begins with our legislature. So we will go to our General Assembly again, ask for their support, which I'm sure we will get, and then hopefully, if all goes well, in November of 2019, the voters of Pennsylvania will have a chance to decide whether we value crime victims' rights enough to codify that in the Constitution.
I want to mention something. I mean, I'll tell you, to get the Pennsylvania General Assembly to do anything unanimously is a either testimony to your hard work or the issue, and probably a combination of votes. Okay, so we've established it's not a partisan issue, but what you'd like to point out is the broad-based support that you have. A whole bunch of organizations have come out in support of what you're trying to do, right?
That's right. So we have great support from the district attorneys around the state, from law enforcement, first responders, the victim and advocate community, and of course the General Assembly. So we have a great base of support. And so right now it's really just letting the voters know that they're going to have a chance for their voice to be heard on this next year.
Yeah. Now we have a crime victims crime victims Bill of Rights. I'll get that out. But you argue it's not sufficient. Now you talked about that before. But you also say there's an imbalance. Well, first of all, what's the Crime Victims Bill of Rights?
So we have in Pennsylvania great crime victims' rights and statute. And a lot of that was passed under Governor Ridge and his administration. So most of the rights that you see in Marsy's law are covered in that. But again, they're only in statute. And that imbalance comes from the rights of the accused and convicted being in the Constitution, as they should be.
Well, yeah, you want to protect them so that in order to make the changes, folks would have to go back to amend the state constitution, not just do it maybe in a fit of passion or something that occurs in the floor of the General Assembly.
Right. We just need to make sure that those rights are solidly within the fabric of our Constitution.
All right, so let me make sure I understand this. There's no change to the victim. The victim's role is the same. There's no change to the prosecutor's role. So that's probably one of the reasons why you had support from the district attorneys in this state.
That's correct. Yeah, the district attorneys have been instrumental, not only in helping us tailor the Marsy's Law, the Marsy's Law language so that it's applicable for Pennsylvania, but also their support with the General Assembly as well.
Now, importantly, no defendant's rights or the defendant, his or her rights aren't abridged, meaning people who have been convicted, who are charged with a crime, you're not diminishing their constitutional rights at all, correct?
That's correct. That's a really important point. Just because we're elevating crime victims' rights does not diminish the rights that are already in the Constitution for the accused and convicted. Somebody said to me recently, just because you blow out my candle, it doesn't make your candle brighter. And that's essentially what we're going to be seeing here.
All right, well, we wish you the best. I mean, this is an important subject, and I'm amazed that you've got such support. I mean, you get anything through the Pennsylvania legislature unanimously, which shows testament, I'm sure, to your hard work, but also to the issue at hand. All right, big stories of the week. We'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, let's get to the big stories of the week. Joining me is Sam Janis. He's with LNP Group, and Charlie Thompson. He's with the Harrisburg Patriot News, and I got to throw in Penn Live or he won't talk to me. You won't do the interview. Right. We'll put their Twitter handles up. I tell you, follow them on Twitter. It'll be very enlightening for you. All right. Somebody or some company went to New York and Virginia and skipped Pennsylvania.
Yeah, how about that?
How did that? Well, first of all, explain what group. I think our viewers know.
Well, we're talking about the famous site selection derby for Amazon HQ2, which was promising something like 50,000 jobs and $5 billion worth of investment for the lucky winner of this site selection process. And it had, I think the final number was like 238 metro areas around the country, offering
putting goodies on the table to get Amazon to come.
To say, look at us, come here. And Pennsylvania was a heavy player for this. And in fact, the good news is that we had 2 cities that made the final 20, the 20 finalists that Amazon had set out earlier this year. The bad news is they made their selection this week, and they picked Arlington, Virginia, and Long Island City, New York, which is actually a part of Queens.
Part of Queens, City. Yeah. Go ahead. The one thing I was going to say is, now we're getting this information about how much money that all these municipalities and state governments put on the table, billions, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this was a huge fight for the last year or more, trying to get the governments to divulge how much they were offering in tax incentives. And
we never did. We only found out, did we know beforehand?
We know a lot more now than we did before.
That's what I was going to say. There were billions on the table. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, and like our state government issued letters this week that they sent to Amazon, basically promising them, if the legislature would have approved it, but this letter was signed off by Governor Wolf and the legislative leaders, some sort of a grant program that would have, I mean, the details are very sketchy, but it amounted to like whatever income tax we collect from your new employees, we will channel back into a performance grant to you. So, in other words, there are many. That was a very sketchy, bare bones element of that proposal.
Just about everybody I know uses Amazon. I mean, you know, I'm clueless about that. My wife takes care of all that. But I mean, this was a big deal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this really mattered.
Well, you know, I mean, there's a great debate about that, actually. I mean, there are, it seems like half the world is upset that Pennsylvania didn't get this jewel that could kind of cemented us as like, hey, we're hot again, you know. And the other half is saying, you know, this is okay. The sun will come up tomorrow, and we can continue now to develop our pharma sector and our own little high-tech sector.
All right, one of the big things the legislature did not do before it ended this session had to do with extending the statute of limitations for child abuse victims, clergy, you know, the issue involving the Catholic Church, its priests and clerics. And they were working on extending the time frame for which, if you were a victim, you could file charges and get some relief. So, where does that all stand?
Yeah, so it's still kind of in limbo, I think. We're in between now, the last session and the new session, which will start officially January 1st when the new members are sworn in. And, you know, it fell apart at the last second. It was the biggest issue in the fall. The biggest point of contention was this 2-year window that they would allow victims to go back and sue abusers if they had already passed that statute of limitation age.
Now, let me catch me up on this. The House passed it, but the Senate held it up. Explain that?
At the end of the day, that's essentially what happened.
So, is there any likelihood that this will pass? I mean, it seems like it had a fair amount of popular support. Go ahead.
It seems like something will have to change. It's unlikely that it'll pass as it was exactly before. And now some of the leadership is different in the House.
Good point.
Representative Brian Culler, for instance, is now the majority leader. He did not support that bill before. And now he's in a position where he's a little bit more in control of the policy. Speaker Mike Turzai did support that bill. So it could theoretically pass the House again, but
get tied up. Is that your sense also?
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue that really kind of helped me understand that the Senate Republican caucus is still Senate President Pro Tem Joe Scarnati's caucus, because this was an issue that he really put his foot down on, and because he feels that he says that the fix that the victims' advocates want is going to run afoul of the Constitution, and I believe that he also believes that it will just create a lot of problems and a lot of unintended problems, because if you open a window for child sex abuse victims, then what about asbestos victims?
It'll be extended to other things. So I'm going to yes or no. You think they'll pass it? If you had a bet,
I think that at some point there will likely be a compromise, because there's too many good things in that bill that are getting held up over the 2-year window, and they're just going to have to manage it somehow. But I think
same question.
I don't know if I want to take the bet, but it'll definitely, we'll be talking about this in January and February.
All right, the legislature is going to be back before we know it. Let's try January. We're not there yet. We'll see what will they do. There are fewer Republicans in it than before.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Well, Sam, as I pointed out, the Republican domination of the state legislature is still there, but in the House, 121, now down to 110, 102 is the operational majority, 34 in the Senate. Now they're down to, 29, with 26 being the majority. What's that all mean, do you think? You cover the legislature.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was a bigger shift than we've seen recently. The Democrats kind of picked up a little bit of momentum. And a lot of the Republicans that lost were some of these more moderate Republicans, a lot in the Southeast and the suburbs outside Philadelphia. So there have been people talking about how both caucuses kind of got a little bit more extreme.
Each going the other
Right.
direction?
Yeah, at a time when the divide is already pretty strong, and there's been a lot of deadlock in recent years. So
Well, the most unhappy guy is a guy named Tom Wolf, I would think, because now, even though there are more Democrats in it and fewer Republicans, the Democrats are more liberal probably, and the Republicans more conservative. We call that what? Polarization?
yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how the dynamic is. I mean, he has his agenda that he's been putting out the last few years, and I think he'll probably come out with that again. But now he has John Fetterman, in the lieutenant governor's mansion too. We'll see how that influences him.
Well, I have a question. Is John Fetterman, the incoming lieutenant governor, going to wear a coat and tie? And that's required. This guy's an interesting character. I'll put it. I'm not being negative. He wears shorts all the time, a lot of shorts, and a black shirt.
I don't know.
Go ahead.
I don't know. Time will tell. I would think that he will dress the part, and the lieutenant governor has male lieutenant governors have always worn a coat and tie.
They have to.
Yeah.
All right. What are they going to do? Is there any possibility to get them together?
Well, the one thing about it is, what I wonder is, here's one way that things could be helped, perhaps, and that is that I have a feeling, and time will tell if this is right or not, but I have a feeling that with a rookie majority leader in Brian Cutler working with Mike Turzai, that House leadership is going to be more cohesive now. So therefore, some of the problems that they ran into in the past was that the majority leader, Dave Reed, would negotiate these packages with the Senate and Governor Wolf. He would come back into his caucus room and he would find that he couldn't sell the deal to his caucus.
So a Republican leader couldn't sell the deal he had worked out with the...
Partly because even the speaker, Mike Turzai, wasn't buying it. So that caused problems. At one point, if you remember, they agreed on a shale tax proposal and it died. And so that happened several times. And I just think the House Republicans may present a more cohesive front from the get-go. So that may actually be a time saver.
But how about the shale tax? I mean, Governor Wolf has put it in every single proposal. He talked about it, by the way, in his victory speech, that short speech he gave over in York when he won. He's going to bring it back?
Yeah, I think he has said that he's going to bring it back, and it's only a matter of time until the budget presentation in February.
Yeah, but with the incoming revenues being pretty decent, I mean, why would the Republicans give him this? If you had a bet, would you bet no?
I mean, I asked Brian Cutler, the new majority leader, the other day if he saw any possibility for this, and he says he thinks that Republicans are still where they were before, and it's probably unlikely.
So we have less than a minute, but both of you think it's going to be more difficult to get the two sides together. We'll just have to wait and see if there's something.
I think there is possibility that they will get some things done. I mean, like I play these things out in my mind, and I wonder, like, for example, the Republicans have wanted work requirements for people who are on medical assistance, 20 hours a week. Governor Wolf wants minimum wage increase. That's too
compromise. You get the last word. Thanks for coming in. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.